Welcome to The Prescription, the Tax Policy Center's biweekly webcast on fiscal policy. This is one of a series of conversations with state, local, and federal government officials, as well as leading economists and other experts. I'm your host, Howard Gleckman, a senior fellow at TPC and editor of our blog, TaxBox. My guest today is Mikki Waid. She's an economist who's worked on Social Security issues for more than 20 years. Mikki was a senior fellow at the National Academy of Social Insurance and a senior policy advisor at AARP. Early in her career, she worked at the Congressional Research Service and at the Social Security Administration. She has her PhD in economics from the George Washington University and currently is research director at the Harvey L. Neiman Health Policy Institute. Before we begin, our usual bit of housekeeping. We encourage audience members to submit questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. The event's being recorded and will be posted online at TPC's website in the near future. We're using captioning, which you can adjust or turn off with the live transcript button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you'd like to join the conversation on social media, please use the hashtag #LiveAtUrban. And if you'd like to suggest a future guest for The Prescription, just email us at info@taxpolicycenter.org. Mikki Waid, welcome to The Prescription.
Sorry for the delay. Thank you very much. It was wonderful to be here.
Good to see you. Thank you. So it looks like we're in for another big fight over the future of Social Security and perhaps Medicare as well. In recent weeks, some Republicans have suggested cutting Social Security benefits as part of an initiative to significantly reduce federal government spending. Last year, Florida Senator Rick Scott, who headed the Senate Republican Campaign Committee, proposed turning Social Security from an entitlement to a spending program that would sunset every 5 years. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy reportedly promised House conservatives a floor vote on major spending cuts, perhaps including Social Security and Medicare, to win their support in his campaign for Speaker. However, last Sunday, he seemed to walk that back and said that those proposals would be off the table. Yet, balancing the budget in 10 years, another goal of some Republicans, without touching Social Security and Medicare and without raising taxes, effectively is impossible. For his part, President Biden proposed some modest Social Security reforms during his presidential campaign, but never followed through. And Biden's rejection of any tax increases for those making $400,000 or less has constrained efforts by congressional Democrats to raise payroll taxes, which currently are capped at about $160,000. I suppose it's an indication of the current state of play that Biden and the Democrats now spend more time talking about Republican Social Security ideas than their own, and that most Republicans have gone entirely silent on the issue. Nonetheless, behind all this political posturing, there's the actual status of the Social Security Trust Fund. So let's start by doing some level setting. What's the situation with Social Security's finances right now?
Great. Well, thank you for that. And I just want to make a quick note that I am a senior research fellow at the Harvey L. Neiman Health Policy Institute. At one point, I was the research director, but now I have a boss who would probably not like to hear that I'm the research director. So I just wanted to make that note. But currently, Social Security is divided basically into two different trust funds. There's the OASI trust funds, which pays basically what we call the retirement benefit for workers and their families. And there's the DI trust fund, which pays the disability benefits for disabled workers and their families. So the DI trust fund is actually fine for the next 75 years. And it used to be in a whole lot worse shape than the retirement trust fund, just because of higher disability incidences. But between 2016 and 2018, Social Security actually increased the payroll tax rate. They decreased it from the retirement trust fund and put it into the DI trust fund, which actually put it in a lot better position than it was just a few years ago. So the DI trust fund is fine. As for the retirement part, the OASI trust fund, basically Social Security can pay what they call scheduled benefits, so the benefit that everybody will expect until 2034. Now, what happens in 2034 is that by that time, it will have depleted all the investments in the trust fund. By law, Social Security has to invest in particular investments. By then, all of those investments will have been matured and redeemed. So the only income that will be available after 2034 is the income from the payroll tax rate. And that will be enough income to fund basically 77% of people's retirement benefit. So benefits will be cut by 23% if nothing is done after 2034.
So to clarify this, you talked about the investments. The investments actually are special treasury bonds
Exactly.
In effect, what's happened, at least my reading of it, in effect, what's happened is the government is the rest of government has been borrowing money from the Social Security surplus to pay for general operations, and in return for that, Social Security gets these bonds. Is that essentially the way it works?
It's a little bit of a yes, but it's a little bit of deception when you put it that way. It's not as sort of straightforward as you say, because let me take the example of myself, okay? When I go to the bank and buy, let's say I buy $100 US Treasury bond. So what that means is that the principal will be $100, and in the future, the government agrees to pay me that $100 plus whatever interest that they owe me. That $100 that I act, my physical $100 that I pay for that treasury bill goes into the general fund. The general fund is the pot of money where the government just pays for everything, all of its expenses. And so anyone, not just Social Security, but anyone who buys a treasury bond, the money used to buy that bond goes into the general fund. However, when it's matured and I want to redeem it, the principal plus the interest also comes from the general fund. And so not only does the money that I give it for the bond goes into the general fund, but the money that's used to pay me comes out of the general fund. But that's how all US Treasury bonds work, not just the one for Social Security.
So a question I get all the time is we've been having this other debate about the debt limit, and people ask me, does the Social Security have anything to do with the federal debt limit? So how should I answer that question?
Yes. I mean, it does, because again, the debt limit is about the amount of money that they have. Ultimately, it's about the money that they have in the general fund. If they don't have enough money in the general fund to pay for their expenses, then they get the additional monies that they need to pay for their expenses through borrowing, public borrowing. And again, that's the issue of like US Treasury bonds or other US investments. And so Social Security, and it's really weird because we don't often think about, this isn't the technical term, but I call it like incestuous financing, because basically the government is borrowing money from itself, but also paying for that borrowing itself also. It's paying itself back. But all of that money comes from the general fund. So for example, if if the government doesn't have enough money in the general fund to pay for benefits scheduled for that month, what's going to happen? It needs to get that money from somewhere. And the government has employed different accounting tactics, I'll say, to pay for the additional money that's needed to pay for benefits. But it's just because of the fact that Social Security investments are invested in US Treasury bonds. That's how it relates to the general fund.
Yeah, this is an interesting argument when people talk about the national debt. They sometimes confuse the total debt, which is about $31 trillion, from the public debt, which is merely $24 trillion, because of those intergovernmental transfers. That's exactly
right.
Yeah.
Right. Now, that doesn't mean that they're completely related. Like, there's no reason why Kevin McCarthy had to include Social Security in his comments in the debt ceiling, because they're really not exactly related. Yes, Social Security affects the debt ceiling because the government needs to have enough money to pay for the benefits, but that has nothing to do with Social Security's solvency. They're two completely separate issues.
So you mentioned at the beginning that in about 10 years, the trust fund will become insolvent.
Yes.
It'll be generating less or spending more than it generates. And that's going to result in a reduction in promised benefits of about 23%.
Correct.
Let's talk about the consequences of that. What is that actually going to mean for Social Security recipients, especially low-income Social Security recipients?
Oh, it's going to be devastating. I mean, Social Security is the #1 anti-poverty program. It keeps more older Americans out of poverty than any other government program. But because children can also receive Social Security benefits, it also keeps a large number of children out of poverty. So this is just going to make a bad situation worse if they're not allowed to pay full benefits.
So my Urban Institute colleagues, Gene Sterling and Karen Smith, have estimated that if benefits are reduced by 23%, the poverty rate of older adults would roughly double.
Yes.
From around 10% to about 20%. Is that right?
I would imagine so. I haven't done the calculations myself, but I do trust Urban's calculations. And so, yes, that sounds about right. And it is, because when you think about it, when it comes to older Americans, what income do they have? They're for the most part, they no longer are working or shouldn't be working in their, relaxing retirement years. So they may have Social Security. If they're lucky, and that's a big if, they'll have some sort of pension, whether it's a defined contribution or defined benefit. But still, the majority of that money, unless they've, especially for low income people, the majority of the income they'll receive in retirement will be Social Security benefits.
Yeah, this is an interesting argument that we often have. People look at the average amount of resources people have in old age, and the average can be misleading because you have people at the one end of the food chain who are very, very wealthy, you have lots of resources, and then you have a substantial number of people at the other end who have almost nothing.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. So I used to look at this when I worked at Social Security. We used to study retirement income a lot from all sources, not just Social Security. And there's absolutely big differences in the median, or with sort of like the middle person earns compared to the average. You really do have to look at the median income resulting from these different retirement income sources, because they can be very skewed from higher income people.
So we've talked about the fact that about 10 years from now, we're going to go off a cliff if we don't do something.
Mm-hmm.
I think about this, and I think this is only 2 presidential elections away, that after the next presidential election and one after that, there's going to be a president sitting in office who's going to be facing this. So let's talk about what can be done about it. And what I'd like to do is kind of go through some of the ideas of what people have come up with for filling the hole, and just tell me what you think about some of them. So the first one that comes to mind, particularly from some Democrats, is lifting that $160,000 Social Security payroll tax cap. Does it make sense to raise that cap? And would you do what's been done with Medicare and impose the tax on all income, all wages?
That's a great question. At one point, the payroll tax cap, I believe it was supposed to be pegged to like the 90th percentile of income, because earnings have increased a lot. Now, I want to say the payroll, that 160,000 represents maybe like the 80th or 82nd percentile. Mm-hmm. So it could be raised more. The only issue with that is that if you raise taxes and raise the amount of, if you raise the earnings for which people have to pay payroll taxes, you also have to do the same on the benefit side. And so you have to include all of those higher earnings in the benefit calculation, which for some will result in increased benefits also. So it's a little bit of a wash there. It's not a complete wash by raising the payroll, by raising the maximum taxable wage. It still would be, I believe, a net positive. In other words, it'll help Social Security more, but not as much as people would think, because you still have to pay those additional benefits on the benefit side.
And in a few minutes, I want to talk to you about this link, but let's go through a couple of the other ideas. So another one is just slowing the growth of benefits for high income retirees. Is that something that makes sense?
Anything that's means testing, which that implies that you're going to do something for a certain income level of individuals, I think is going to be hard to pass, just because people don't like discrimination. Even if it's for the rich, some people may be a little bit more amenable to, taxing the rich more or something like that. But really, when it comes to receiving benefits, I'm not sure if the public will accept or how willing they'll be able to accept that sort of discrimination on an income level. It can help, but again, the problem with that is that there's so few people at that upper income level that it's really not going to save as much money as you think if you fiddle with their benefits.
Mm-hmm. What about raising the retirement age? The argument, of course, is that the nature of work has changed, life expectancy has increased. Why not just raise the retirement age?
That has complicated issues also. I mean, and look what France is going through with raising their retirement. Yeah. And there's actually 2 different retirement ages. So it depends on which one you want to raise. There's something called the full or the normal retirement age. And what that is, that's the age where you can get sort of like what they call a full benefit, or 100% of what you were expected to get. But there's also the earliest retirement age, which is the age that you can actually start receiving a benefit. That's age 62. The full retirement age for those of us born after 1960 is now 66. And so if already the full retirement age has been increased from 65 to 66, and that happened during the Reagan era when Social Security was having financing issues then too. And that was one of the solutions that they had. And nobody protested from what I remember. However, if they were to raise the earliest eligibility age, which is the earliest age that you can start receiving a Social Security retirement or spouse benefit, that will absolutely upset people. Because, it will have the effect of, one, perhaps causing more people to apply for disability benefits instead. So if you're like right at that margin, if you're 61 and you're not feeling well, you don't think you can work longer, you kind of have a choice of to do your best to stay in the labor force or to apply for disability benefits. This would probably cause more people to apply for disability benefits. You also have to think about the groups of people who don't live as long, minorities or men. Raising the retirement age will be less beneficial for them because it means a smaller period of time for which they can receive benefits.
And I suspect it also matters what kind of work you're doing. If you're doing
exactly
manual labor, very different than if you're doing what we do, sitting in an office.
Yeah. And again, those workers will probably apply for, if they can, apply for disability benefits. So that it'll be a bigger burden on the DI trust fund, but perhaps it would help the retirement side, the OASI trust fund.
So all the ideas we've been talking about are aimed at restoring trust fund solvency. It's simply moving numbers around. But I wonder, in your view, is the looming deadline also an opportunity to rethink the program more fundamentally? And if it is, how would you do it?
Great. So there are two answers that I have for that. One, I really would love, because Social Security has been called the third rail. In other words, if you touch it, your political career dies. So one of the reasons why nothing has been done yet is because politicians are very afraid to do anything with Social Security, whether it's raising taxes or cutting benefits, just because you're going to make someone unhappy for sure. So I would love to sort of take some of the decisions away from Congress into the public. So what I would propose is a year-long educational program for the public, where Congress and other thought leaders outside of the government would educate the public about Social Security, its finances, and then an independent congressional committee be formed to come up with 3 different proposals. One would be primarily increasing taxes, the other would be primarily reducing benefits, and the third would be some combination of the two. And then during whatever presidential election is after that, it would be great to have those on a federal election ballot so that the public could vote on what policy proposals we think are best for us. And that would shield Congress and politicians a bit from some of the repercussions of them trying to do something to correct the system. So if the world were mine, that's what I would do. The other thing is Social Security does have to be, I think, significantly reformed, because in its current state, I don't think it'll ever be in balance. And this is what I mean. In 1935, when Social Security was first enacted, the only individuals who could receive benefits were workers who paid the payroll tax. And so if that worker died, the Social Security would give the estate, I want to say it was like around 3.5% of what their expected total benefits would be. And the reason why it was 3.5% is because that was around the amount of payroll taxes they thought the worker were paid. And so it was kind of a one-for-one exchange. If you paid payroll taxes, you would get benefits. If you happen to have died, then basically your estate would get your payroll taxes back. Now, after that, oh my goodness, Social Security has expanded in so many ways. In 1939, it expanded to wives and widowers and children. And notice I said wives and widowers, because it wasn't until 1950 when it got sued that it started to allow husbands and widowers, to get benefits. And so through legal action, Social Security has been forced to expand benefits. Also through social changes, Social Security has expanded benefits. What it did not do is to expand the finances to account for those benefits. And so we're in a situation now where there are so many different family members, spouses, ex-spouses, widows, ex-widows, children, grandparents, grandchildren, pretty much everyone except for aunts, uncles, and cousins who can receive a Social Security benefit without having to have paid any payroll tax at all. And that, I think, is just what makes it unsustainable, because they're just not getting enough income to pay for these additional benefits.
So how would you fix it?
Oh, it's complicated. And I hate to, I really hate to say it, because it really would amount to, and it can't be done for children because children aren't expected to work, but at least for spouse benefits, somehow it would have to be tied to how much payroll taxes that spouse has contributed. For example, if they didn't pay any payroll taxes then the question is, should they be allowed to get benefits? If it's going to stay solvent, then you would say no. Currently, Social Security is just too generous. And, I'm not comfortable to say it should be less generous, because once you give people benefits, it's hard to take back. But somehow it has to account for the additional benefits it's allowed people to get without having contributed to the system.
So I think that's a really interesting piece of this, because a bedrock principle of the program from the beginning was this explicit link between contributions and benefits.
Exactly.
That was the insurance concept. You weren't paying a tax, you were making a contribution,
right,
and you were going to get a benefit. Should we consider explicitly increasing benefits for those who need them the most and slowing the growth of benefits for wealthy older adults who need them the least?
That goes back to means testing, and redistributing income, which of course higher income people do not like. Redistribution is like a sinful word. If we were going to be a more just society, and I cannot speak for what society overall would think, if we were going to be a more just society, then yes, we would redistribute benefits from some of the wealthier, because they have other forms of retirement income, unlike lower income people. They have pensions, they have stock options, probably. They have a much larger variety of retirement income than those lower income people who basically just have Social Security for their income. So I would say, yes, some redistribution is okay, but whether or not society as a whole and whether or not Congress would actually attempt, to put that into law, I doubt it.
So let's separate the politics from the substance. On the substance, would you think something like a basic minimum benefit would be a good idea?
Yes, because the minimum benefit hasn't been changed in a long time. And so it really does need to be updated because it just hasn't kept pace with wage growth. If I'm not mistaken, I believe it's based on CPI growth, and wage growth is faster than CPI growth. And Social Security benefits in general are based on wage growth. And so the formula for calculating the special minimum really does need to be changed and updated, because it's just not, you can get the special minimum benefit and still be in poverty, basically.
Right. So then we have the political question, and you've alluded to this before. It's an interesting thing. So liberals generally favor the idea of progressive government benefit programs. But in this case, they worry that if Congress decouples the benefits from the contributions, the program starts to look more like welfare than like Social Security, and it loses public support. It sounds like you share that concern, that's a real issue.
Absolutely. Social Security is such a popular program in part because people feel that they've earned it. They see money going, and a little bit, again, it's sort of like miseducation, because people actually believe that they have some account somewhere where their payroll taxes are being invested, and they just get that money back, kind of like an IRA when they retire. And that's not how Social Security works. It truly is a pay as you go program where the payroll taxes that we pay today help fund the benefits for people that are receiving today. So it's not in our own individual account, but because people believe that and believe, they have the rightful belief that they've earned the right, because you have to make a certain amount of earnings to receive a Social Security benefit. They believe that it's their right to receive. And so you can't really decouple the payroll tax portion from the benefit portion. What people don't understand, though, is that as I've explained, there are a lot of different types of benefits that you can receive, not because you have yourself has worked or paid the payroll tax, but you just happen to be related to someone who did. And so in a way, like I said, it's very generous. And so it's more generous, I believe, than people realize.
So let me ask you about another hot button issue, going back to the Bush administration. And that's the question of whether Social Security funds should be invested in securities other than those treasury bonds.
Right. What do you mean? Because Bush specified specific accounts. I can't remember what they were called, but basically it would be like an IRA for Social Security, right, which is a slightly different issue than investing the payroll tax in something other than treasury bonds.
Right. And I was thinking more of the latter. I wasn't thinking about privatizing Social Security in that sense. I was thinking more about a more diverse portfolio of investments. Normally nobody would invest all of their retirement money in government.
Right. That would help. Absolutely. But there's a few issues with that too, because I would prefer that if Social Security went that route, they would invest in some index fund like the S&P or, the Dow Jones. But there are still people who will sort of like protest that Social Security is investing in some company that they shouldn't think. So there will be that issue. But the other issue is that it's so volatile, and heaven help us if the thing about Social Security investments, because they are U.S. Treasury investments, both the principal, and this is, the law will have to be changed because the current legislation for Social Security is that any payroll tax has to be invested in an investment where there's a guaranteed principal and interest. And that's sort of like a safe route, because for sure the stock market is not a guaranteed interest. And if we had like another stock market crash or another depression, that would totally wipe out people. That would wipe out the system potentially. And so it's scary. I don't know. I do think it would have increased returns and put the system on better footing if they were allowed to invest in some other investment mechanism like the stock market, but it could also put the program in so much more uncertain footing and potentially just demolish it if things got bad enough.
Let me ask you about the state of the Social Security Administration itself. And I'm particularly interested in some ideas that have come up in recent years involving using Social Security to distribute a universal children's benefit. So Senator Romney's proposes Family Security Act, which would shift responsibility for distributing benefits from the IRS, from the child tax credit, to the Social Security Administration. Melissa Kearney at Brookings has proposed Social Security for kids. Now, Romney and Kearney have very different ideas about how these were actually going to work, but they both like the idea of monthly cash payments through the Social Security system. Is that something you think would be appropriate? Is it something you think the Social Security system can handle?
It depends on whether or not it can be programmed in a computer and just sort of spit out. Currently, especially with the DI, part of the reason why there's such a huge disability backlog is that each and every year, Social Security is not funded enough. In other words, it's not given enough money to hire the amount of workers needed to process all of those disability applications in a timely manner. And so if we're working with the current workforce and you add another benefit type, unless it can be done automatically via a computer program, it's just going to slow the system down even more. However, whether or not Social Security is the correct, I believe it would be the correct organization for various benefits, because essentially it has all of the information. It has people's earnings. It can ask people about their children, how many children that they have, about their marital status and all of that. So they're good at figuring out benefits and benefits amounts. That's what they're good at. They actually don't do anything concerning the actual money. That's the Department of Treasury. Department of Treasury gets all of the payroll taxes and it actually pays the benefits. That's not Social Security's job.
Right. I mean, it's an interesting thing because we asked the IRS to do this, and the IRS really, its job is to collect money. It's not to pay money. And now we're asking it to do that. Well, Mikki, this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much for taking
Absolutely.
the time.
Thank you for having me.
And lots more to talk about. We'll see what Congress actually does.
Nothing, I guarantee. At least not until it gets bad.
On that optimistic note, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Bye-bye.